Okay, so this is my first year taking over Arizona. Get out of the way. I'll check that out later. I'm just going to go over a few things. So, year one, I took over. Let me turn down the volume to make sure it's easy to hear me. Year one, I picked my favorite team as San Francisco, but I allowed the game to choose a team for me. I got hired by Atlanta after a 5-10 start, got them an upset win over Tampa Bay in the final week to make them 6-10. Then in year two, I doubled their win total, making them 12-4, which often is good enough to win a division, but New Orleans took the division at 12-3-1. My Atlanta team was a wild card at 12-4. Unfortunately, we lost 41-21 on the road at Minnesota in the wild card round. The very next year, my Atlanta team went 15-1. The only team we lost to was Seattle, a team that we couldn't beat in year two, mostly due to the fact that I had to put in a backup quarterback for my injured starting quarterback and only lost by 3 points despite using a not-so-good backup. Maybe if my starter was there, I would have won. But yes, a loss in year three. My one and only loss was to Seattle. I would, later that year, face Los Angeles, the only undefeated team up to that point, and beat the crap out of them, 31-7. We both ended the season at 15-1, so I clinched home field advantage due to owning the tiebreaker by beating Los Angeles. I went ahead and, in revenge against Minnesota, completely destroyed them in the divisional round at home. I think it was 42-3. And then in the NFC Championship, I completely dominated Green Bay, 38-3, I think it was. And then the championship game, I completely destroyed Houston, whose team attributes weren't really that high, but they nevertheless made it to the championship, and I completely dominated them 38-14. I'll show you. Past Retro Bowl championships, and they're counting Super Bowls prior to when I first started doing this. So in year one, when I took over Atlanta in the final week, San Francisco had returned to a second consecutive championship, but instead of losing to Kansas City, they would beat Houston. In year two, when my Atlanta team lost the wild card round, New England went on to beat Seattle in the championship in a rematch of the 2014 Super Bowl. In year three, my Atlanta team dominated Houston in the championship. So they went to 2 championships in 3 years, but ultimately dominated them. Year 4, I decided to take over Jacksonville, who was an awful team before I took them over. I improved them to 8-8, but not to the playoffs. Tennessee took the division for a second consecutive year. Houston did not make it as a wild card and go to the championship. They had a losing record. New Orleans would beat Pittsburgh in the championship, and Pittsburgh would not return to the playoffs ever since. San Francisco hasn't been to the playoffs since, I think, year 2, when New England beat Seattle in the championship. In year 5, I improved Jacksonville to be 11-5 to win the division, and ultimately go in my first ever battle against Cleveland, against Cleveland, it was in the wild card round. I beat them very closely. I beat New England fairly easily in the divisional round, as I beat them closely during the regular season, something I couldn't do with Atlanta, as I lost to New England with them. And I would go on to win a very close AFC championship against at Baltimore, who was the number 1 seed at 13-3. Then I'd go to the championship and choke against Los Angeles and lose 52-28. Very disappointing. In year 6, my team clinched home field advantage at 14-2. We beat Cleveland very closely in the divisional round at home. We had to face Baltimore in the AFC Championship. This time we were the home team. In year 5, I was the 3rd seed at 11-5. Baltimore was the top seed at 13-3. Year 6, I was the top seed at 14-2. Baltimore was the 3rd seed at 11-5. And I would beat them in overtime at home in the AFC Championship. So 2 consecutive AFC Championships where I beat Baltimore very closely. And then I would face Philadelphia in the championship. Now, prior to that, my defense really sucked, and I had to just keep outscoring opponents on offense. This time against Philadelphia in the championship, my defense actually played better. They weren't great, but they played better. But ultimately, I screwed up on offense and lost, which sucked. But then year 7 came, and my Jacksonville team was incredible, going 15-1. My one only loss was to Buffalo. I would go on to clinch home field advantage. I would completely destroy Miami, a team I've never beaten before. Lost to them with Atlanta, lost to them again with Jacksonville. I would go on to crush Miami 21-3 in the divisional round. Fairly easily beat Kansas City. I think it was like 33-20 in the AFC Championship. And go against a team I've lost to 3 times. Twice with Atlanta, once with Jacksonville, a team I could never beat, Seattle. This time I finally beat them by dominating them in the Retro Bowl Championship, 34-14. That was incredible.